Welcome to Taiwan Report News Brief, news analysis and context from Taichung, Taiwan. I'm Donovan Smith. All right, welcome to our Kaohsiung mayoral byelection pre-election special. I watched the rallies, so you didn't have to, and the KMTs turned out a mess. I also go into what to watch for in the results on Saturday's by-election. But up first, some headlines. Taiwan's official statistics bureau has lowered its forecast for the country's economic growth in 2020 to 1.56% after Taiwan registered negative growth in the second quarter. The latest growth estimate by the Directorate General of Budget Accounting and Statistics on Friday was 0.11 percentage points lower than its forecast of 1.67% GDP growth made in May. Express maritime shipping service between Taiwan and China keeps booming due to the rise in e-commerce business, Taiwan Ports International said this week. The Executive Yuan on Thursday passed a central government budget plan for 2021, which projects a deficit of 201.5 billion NT for the year. It includes a proposed 4.4% increase in defense spending, and if the F-16 special budget is included, it would mean defense spending would hit 2.4% of GDP, or around 11% of the overall budget. The budget plan has to be reviewed and passed by the Legislative Yuan before becoming officially approved. We'll come back to this topic when it passes the legislature. The Executive Yuan passed a proposed amendment to the Civil Code on Thursday to lower the legal age of majority to 18 from 20 and to set the engagement age at 17 and the marriage age at 18 for both men and women. The current law states that males and females cannot marry before they turn 18 and 16, respectively, and they cannot be engaged before 17 and 15, respectively. The current age of majority was set 91 years ago. All right, both the DPP and KMT held major rallies ahead of Saturday's Kaohsiung mayoral by-election, while the TPP held more subdued events. Both of the rallies were big, though a rough estimate from the TV suggested that the DPP rally was a bit larger. It rained sporadically throughout the day, but the crowds mostly held up, huddled in raincoats and under umbrellas, the DPP followers an ocean of yellow and green, the KMT a sea of ROC flags. Of the two, I paid less attention to the DPP rally. All of the clips I saw on the TV showed a highly professional, tightly crafted affair with clever use of inspirational music. The great and the good in the DPP spoke, including the president, the vice president, and the premier. Overall, a powerful unity lineup. DPP candidate Chen Chi-mai tried mightily to be charismatic, but as usual wasn't terribly good at it, but he did manage to project competence and dedication. It appeared that the DPP wrapped up their event earlier of the two, which turned out to be a very good thing for them. The KMT rally was professionally organized, but didn't come across as slick and tight as the DPP rally. During the day, there were separate appearances for speeches by former President Ma Ying-jeou, former KMT chairs Wu Duanyi and Eric Chu or Zhu Liluan, and former Legislative Speaker Wang Jinping. Notably absent were Taiwan's most popular politician, new Taipei Mayor Hou Yu-ih, as well as Taichung Mayor Liu Xiuyan, though she recently had surgery and is largely confined to a wheelchair or propped up on a cane, so her absence may be due to that. I tuned in to watch the grand finale of the KMT rally in full, and waited as the MCs launched endless rounds of call and response with the audience. It was pretty clear the grand finale was being held up for some reason, which was indirectly confirmed when the final stage holders showed up when the MC referred to waiting. Up front and center were Party Secretary General Li Qianlong, though he didn't speak, KMT Chairman Johnny Chang, KMT mayoral candidate Jane Lee, and former Kaohsiung mayor, just ousted in a recall vote in June, Daniel Han Kuo-yu. Interestingly, none of the big shots who'd spoken on the stage earlier in the day stuck around for this, possibly suggesting they didn't want to appear on stage with Han. That's an unusual lack of unity on these kinds of events. As these four took to the stage, along with a gaggle of city councilors and other worthies, the MCs called out, "Long time no see," and the crowd responded enthusiastically. It was clear they were referring to former Mayor Han, who has kept a low profile since being ousted. It was also about this point that the rain started up again, though not too heavily. Han took the mic first, giving a fairly typical Han speech, some specifics, some platitudes, and some humor, but as always, a bit rambling and at least in part off the cuff. He shared his memories of City Councilor Jane Lee from when he was a mayor, and Li Meizhen is, by the way, her Chinese name, praising her for her dedication and hard work, especially on issues like getting air conditioners in schools. Then, speaking of children, veered off course into one of the weirder tangents he's gone off on, and that's a pretty high bar with him. He spoke of Lee telling him that she wanted to have another child, and said she asked him how to do it, which seems dubious considering she'd already had kids before. This is also a bit tactless because Lee's mother-in-law decided to bring up the rather private subject of Lee previously having a miscarriage at a recent rally. But you guessed it, it gets weirder. Han said he told Lee that he didn't know how to do it, which, as a father, also seems rather dubious. But he told her that after his wife ate a goose egg, his wife almost immediately got pregnant. I'm pretty sure that was a goose egg, is what he said. He then proceeded to tell the rally that after Lee ate tons of goose eggs and then turned to her and asked how many, she looked a little flustered and said 100, and that answer seemed to please Han immensely. Now, it's hard not to feel sorry for Jane Lee at this juncture. This is a private issue, but not only had her mother-in-law brought it up, here at her final campaign rally, during the crowning moment of all of her hard work, the world is being told about her fertility issues and the weird way she tried to deal with it. Awkward, to put it mildly, and very tactless on the part of Han. It's obviously nobody's business and has nothing to do with her ability to be mayor. Johnny Chang, KMT chairman, took the stage next. It was then that the rain turned into a heavy downpour. It's at this point that the clothing they were wearing became an issue. Johnny Chang was wearing a dark blue shirt, and aside from constantly having to wipe water from his face, he gave an energetic speech. The other three, however, were wearing white shirts in a torrential downpour. You do the math. Han was wearing a campaign vest over his shirt, so he was lucky. But Secretary General Lee's vest was pushed aside by his rather large belly, and Jane Lee only had her white T-shirt. The two of them looked like losers in a wet T-shirt competition. Secretary General Lee seemed oblivious to the fact that we were getting a very detailed look at his less than stellar physique, but Jane Lee was looking increasingly uncomfortable. Fortunately, just before she was to take the mic, a thoughtful soul in the KMT handed her a campaign vest, which she put on tightly. Jane Lee, considering she was being drenched and water was pouring down her face, gave an impressively poised and energetic speech. She did a good job under the circumstances and showed some grit in the face of challenge. From what I could understand of her speech, alas, my Taiwanese is pretty spotty, it sounded pretty good, connecting with the common people on issues that impact their lives. But there was no getting around the fact that the grand finale was a bit of a disaster. When they finished speaking, a group of middle-aged women managed to surge past security and mob Han, showing that at least some of his Han army is as loyal as ever. Now, most likely within the KMT, there will be some resentment at who held up the grand finale, which put it smack in the middle of torrential rain, which the DPP managed to avoid. It also begs the question, why weren't they better prepared? All right, there are several things I'll be looking for in the election results. Well, it may be tough to glean from the numbers. I'm curious about how much support Han added to Lee's campaign. Strategically, I think it was a good move. She was languishing way down in the polls. Han showing up likely turned away few, if any, of the voters who were planning to vote for her. But Han's fans are known for their enthusiasm, and many of them were first-time or generally only sporadic voters in the past when they voted for him. Li will need as many of these as she can get to avoid a totally humiliating loss. So, as for what would constitute a humiliating loss, that brings me to the number 31. In both the main pan-blue newspapers, UDN and the China Times, there have been articles suggesting that Chairman Johnny Chiang would come under pressure to resign if Li's support falls below 31% in the final tally. That number is based on the KMT candidate's share of the vote in the 2014 election, which was not considered a good showing. So it is possible that Johnny Chiang's fate and that of the reforms he's trying to enact in the KMT, and from extension, possibly the future of the KMT itself, will depend on her meeting or beating that target. Another number to watch is the support for Taiwan People's Party candidate Jean Wu, or Wu Yizheng. The TPP is now the third most powerful party in the legislature and is trying to become competitive with the two main parties. While it's very unlikely he's going to win, he's no superstar candidate, their share of the vote will be illuminating about how much interest there is about a third party, in Kaohsiung. If he manages to surprise and outpoll Jane Li, then the pressure on Johnny Chiang will be even higher to resign. Finally, the DPP is explicitly aiming to beat the turnout of nearly 9.4 million votes that came out to vote in support for the recall of Han Kuo-yu. If they get that, that would be a considerable mandate for both their candidate Chen Chi-mai and the party as a whole. If not, that would suggest that the recall was more about dislike of Han and or the KMT than an indication of support for Chen and or the DPP. All right, please join us as a patron on Patreon. Your support means a lot to us. It's very encouraging and helps us move forward. All right, hit like and subscribe and all that good stuff, and tune in tomorrow.
This has been brought to you by the Taiwan Report. For more content like this, become our patron at report.tw.
哎呦，就是那个台湾狗啦，最喜欢我的台湾狗了。